Tonight, the ghostly story we tell you is absolutely true. It takes place in an undisclosed location right here in North Carolina. You may not know it, but North Carolina is home to many ghosts.
It's said these ghosts once possessed bodies of living folk. Folk exactly like you and me. Yes, they were one of us.
Might one of these ghosts be seated behind you right now, waiting to blow cold air on the back of your necks when the story starts? Probably. Let us speak to you now of the true story of Belle Jones, her father, brother, and 2 sisters. A Haunted House, from Tar Heel Ghosts by John Harden. Belle Jones and her father visited the charming, picturesque home when he looked the place over as a prospective purchaser. The occupants at that first visit were a family, husband, wife, 2 children. Unfortunately, a 3rd child had recently died. The wife explained why they were selling the place. I'm frightened to stay here alone with my children. There are so many inexplicable things in this house, and the rumor that some member of every family who has occupied this house died here, and we've established this from our own experience, has gotten on my nerves.
We listened to the woman sympathetically, but later my father and I laughed at her superstitious fears. We didn't tell the rest of the family what she said, but we went ahead and bought the old house.
And for the first few weeks of occupancy, all was peaceful. Then things began to happen. The Jones brother regularly came home for his midday meal. It was his habit to enter at the front door and hang his hat on a rack that always stood near the front entrance. He would then walk briskly up the stairs.
One day I heard someone enter the house through the front door, pause by the hat rack, and walk briskly upstairs. Of course, I knew it was my brother, but he didn't come down to lunch. So I called him, "James! James!" There was no answer, so I went upstairs to investigate. I was astonished when he wasn't there. His hat wasn't on the hat rack. It was as though no one had ever entered the house.
This was the beginning. Strange doings followed quickly on the heels of other weird business to pile up to this most unaccountable haunted house story.
To this day, I'm completely mystified by some of the things that happened in that old house. For one thing, except on a couple of occasions, I was never frightened by those ghostly apparitions. This lack of fear is one of the things that puzzles me the most even now.
After that first walking noise, Belle heard steps at all hours of the day and in all parts of the house.
Many a time I stood at the foot of those old stairs looking up to the top. I could never see a figure nor a shadow, but I could hear the sound of a man's heavy tread taking those 22 steps one at a time down to where I stood. The steps always walked past me.
There were other mysterious noises in the old house.
Once I heard a great crash of falling dishes. I ran to the kitchen to see what was wrong. There were no dishes broken. There was nothing out of place. There was no one there. Many times when I was in the room next to the dining room, I could hear dishes clinking through the wall, and it sounded like there were people sitting at the table eating a meal. But when I went to check, no one would be there. Nothing would be out of place.
Gradually, her family too began to hear and see extraordinary things. One day, one of the younger sisters spoke casually of having seen her sister Mary upstairs, seated in a bedroom, brushing her long hair as it hung down over her face.
Why, honey, Mary isn't even in the house. She's downtown attending a meeting.
No, she's here. I saw her. I stopped for a minute at the door to her room and watched her brush her hair. I did see her.
The fact is, Mary was downtown, and she was not in the house.
And then, as if to confirm the gloomy rumor of death, which the previous occupant of the house had passed on to the Jones family. Mr. Jones fell sick.
It wasn't until my father fell sick that I began to hear those strange, heavy footsteps in the night. Until that time, they had only occurred during the daytime.
The mysterious goings-on then entered a new phase. The father's sick room adjoined Belle's room. Belle did all the nursing. One night, very tired, she returned to her room and dropped down onto her bed to get some much-needed rest. The only light in her room was a mingling of moonlight and rays from a street lamp shining through the window. Some time later, she awakened suddenly.
When I awoke, I had a strange feeling. There's somebody in this room. I wondered if I was awake or if I was still sleeping.
For a few moments, Belle lay quite still without opening her eyes. The impression of a presence near her persisted and grew. She became sure that if she opened her eyes, she would see it. So she opened them.
This is the sight I saw when I opened my eyes. A young girl, about 14 or 15 years old, was hovering above me. Only her head and shoulders were visible. This was one of the few times that I was scared of the ghost, and I lay there frozen in my bed with fear. The ghost's expression was sad and wistful. Her face pale, almost waxy. Her eyelashes were long and dark. Her eyes were closed. The details of her features were so vivid, even in the semi-darkness, I could see that her auburn hair was damp and hung in ringlets around her face. Oh, I must be asleep, I thought. If I can only wake up, this ghost will be gone. If I touch it, I'm sure it will disappear.
Mustering both resolve and energy, Belle sat up in her bed and reached toward the apparition.
The apparition did not disappear, but it moved out of my reach.
Belle got out of her bed.
And the ghost moved even further.
Belle followed.
The ghost went around to the end of my bed and moved closer to the window.
It was now framed in silhouette against a portion of the green window shade.
As the ghost moved in front of the window shade, I remember thinking, whoa, anybody with gorgeous auburn hair like she has should always wear green.
What?
Yes, this is a true part of this true story that we're telling tonight. In spite of her terror that she was experiencing, she was able to stop and think the thought, redheads look good in green. When the form reached the window, it vanished.
2 days later, Belle Jones' father died, and shortly after that, the family moved out of the weird old house.
After Belle's family moved out of the house, a man, his wife, and small son moved in. The boy was taken suddenly and mysteriously ill. A few days later, he died.